Down through the years, Loesser's apology in the form of a diamond bracelet has become fairly legendary, although Miss Bigley only ever seems to have mentioned a dozen red roses which were sent in reconciliation by Frank Loesser's wife. And in the words of Cy Foyer, flowers were sent, apologies were made, grovelling took place, and the show went on.
Just talking musicals with you.
Hello, I'm Lesley Anne Knight, and welcome to Just Talking Musicals and part 3 of our Guys and Dolls story. In 1950, there was a new show called Guys and Dolls about to open on Broadway, produced by two young producers keen to follow up on their first show, Where's Charlie?, with another hit that they hoped might secure them a foothold on Broadway's ladder of success. Cy Foyer and Ernest Martin's show had been inspired by a set of stories written by newspaperman and writer Damon Runyon. Runyon was best known for his humorous short stories about gamblers, hustlers and gangsters set during the Prohibition era in New York, inhabited by characters from Brooklyn or the Midtown demi-monde, with colourful names like Harry the Horse, Benny Southstreet and Rusty Charlie, and you most certainly did not want to mess with them. To mirror Runyon's roll call of characters, Cy Foyer used a quirky but nonetheless succinct phrase, people with bumps, to describe the cast he was looking for, whilst his director, George Kaufman, framed it in a more eloquent way with What We Want, Gentlemen as a kind of geometrically interesting ensemble. To anyone who doesn't know, George S Kaufman was known as the Dean of Broadway. He was highly revered, a founding member of the famed Algonquin Round Table, a literary group where he rubbed shoulders with the likes of Dorothy Parker, Harpo Marx and Alexander Woollcott. He was a two-time Pulitzer Prize Award winner and had a lifetime of distinguished theatrical achievements to his name. But there's one thing that was certain. They knew they were definitely looking for people with bumps, and they set about casting actors who could sing for their lead roles, and Foyer's recollection of this time makes it sound like yesterday. He wrote, "Our biggest concern was to find authentic characters who would look like Runyon gamblers. This was not as easy as it sounds. We would have to search far outside the regular 8x10 headshots to come up with brand new craggy faces to fill the stage. But from the first, it seemed that the gods of Broadway had smiled on the show. Everyone was inspired. We couldn't seem to do anything wrong." Broadway actor Sam Levine was cast as Nathan Detroit, with a self-confessed vocal range of approximately 1 octave, and the role of his long-term fiancée, Miss Adelaide, went to a Broadway favourite in the form of comedy actress Vivian Blaine. Broadway actor Robert Alder, whose family ties took him straight back to Naples, was perfectly cast as the slick Sky Masterson, and the prim mission worker who steals his heart was played by a young Broadway actress, Isabel Bigley, who had just returned from London where she'd been playing Laurie in Oklahoma. But they'd definitely taken risks as well, casting cabaret circuit singer Stubby Kaye in the role of Nicely Nicely Johnson. But no matter what, Cy Foyer had found his cast with the perfect set of bumps for this new show. What wasn't so certain was whether they could pull it off. But of course there was no question as to the distinction of their director, George S Kaufman, along with the finely honed lyrics and joyous music of Frank Loesser, and the skillful script-writing talent of comedy writer Abe Burrows to deliver them their fable of Broadway. Burrows was a born and bred New Yorker and had met Runyon through his friend Walter Winchell at the Cub Room, a place where all the newspaper columnists knew they were sure to get a good quote from big names. In his autobiography, beautifully titled Honest Abe, Burrows tells a story that enchantingly connects Runyon's Broadway fable with real life. He writes, "The heroine, Miss Sarah, is a lovely young missionary who does her preaching on Broadway. I've been told that the model for Miss Sarah was a real person, a gorgeous former Follies girl who became a missionary worker and devoted her life to converting evil sinners and wicked gamblers who inhabited the Broadway theatrical district. Her looks and style drew large, admiring crowds. Walter Winchell once told me that lots of guys fell in love with her, including Winchell himself." I hadn't heard that story until recently, but for me it sprinkles stardust on the outer edges of the story and is proof positive of why Abe Burrows was the right man for the job. When you look at Runyon's stories, Frank Loesser's music seems perfectly pitched to reflect the author's quirky, upbeat style. And on the flip side, it seems Loesser wouldn't have looked too out of place in the stories either. By all accounts, he was by no means a pussycat to work with, and well known for his sudden outbursts, which were then tempered with equal measures of generosity and thoughtfulness. He preferred to write just before dawn, often with the aid of a martini, and when he sat in a public place, he insisted on having his back to the wall. For Loesser, the music was all, and he would demand the company sing it loud in rehearsals, even when they were trying to learn Michael Kidd's choreography. Isabel Bigley, who was playing Miss Sarah, famously had a run-in with the composer when she was rehearsing the song If I Were a Bell one day, and Loesser went a famous step too far and slapped her around the face when she nervously giggled in the middle of one of his rants. She said in an interview a few years later, "I think he was as stunned as I was. I just continued on with the song like it had never happened. You know, we all understood. There was tension. We were going to open in a couple of days and everybody was under tremendous pressure. We were working almost 24 hours a day." Down through the years, Loesser's apology in the form of a diamond bracelet has become fairly legendary, although Miss Bigley only ever seems to have mentioned a dozen red roses which were sent in reconciliation by Frank Loesser's wife. And in the words of Cy Foyer, flowers were sent, apologies were made, grovelling took place, and the show went on. It was also amidst the drama of these rehearsals that they also discovered that Sam Levine really couldn't sing more than an octave, let alone in tune, and that it would actually work much better if Stubby K, alias Nicely Nicely Johnson, stepped up to the plate with his beautiful, booming voice to take the lead in the show-stopping Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat. And this was one of the remarkable things about this show, that in the search for their authentic denizens of Broadway, they actually auditioned people who had never worked before as Broadway professionals. Stubby K was just one of those people. Cy Foyer described him as a Borscht Belt singer based in the Catskill Mountains, and the moment I saw him, I knew he was perfect for the part. Nicely Nicely Johnson is a genial character, sporting a loud bow tie and a bulging sports jacket, and a perpetual cheery disposition. He was given his name by Damon Runyon because whenever someone asks how he is, he invariably replies, "Nicely, nicely, thank you." And Stubby K also had a golden voice, and his rendition of Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat was set to go down in musical theatre history as one of the most energising, life-affirming showstoppers the musical theatre has ever known. And he made it his own. So, in late October 1950, the company made their way south out of New York for a 4-week tryout run at the Shubert Theatre in Philadelphia. Robert Alder, who was playing Sky Masterson, remembered how 40 out of the 41 shows were completely different. We continuously were making changes. You'd think we had the world's worst flop on our hands. But George Kaufman was a renowned perfectionist, well known for making revisions and meticulously looking for where he could make a show better, never settling for just good enough. And maybe some directors do just make changes because they can or because they lack the experience to know what's going to work. But Kaufman was quite clearly a different kettle of fish, and Cy Foyer knew it, recalling in 2003, "There is no better architect at staging and constructing a play than George S Kaufman. He knew all the secrets of the stage. He knew where the story lagged, where it was spun out of control, where to introduce new plot elements, and, perhaps most important, when to leave things alone and simply allow them to settle." And when they finished their 4 weeks at the Shubert with just a week before their Broadway opening, they still didn't feel ready, and they still didn't have some of the costumes. So they moved on to the Erlanger for 1 more week of not just George Kaufman's changes, but also Frank Loesser's absolute insistence that everything should be sung as loudly as possible, no matter what. But Guys and Dolls and its sterling troupe of performers eventually got through tryouts and all the myriad of changes, and finally opened for business on Broadway at the 46th Street Theatre on Friday the 24th of November 1950. And sitting nervously with his wife amongst the eager first-nighters, Abe Burrows vividly recalled the overture, the opening dance, and the 3 horseplays came out. A trumpet blew, and there was a wave of laughter through the audience. I said to my wife, "We're in." Right, that's it for this episode. Coming up, after all the hard work and constant changes, not to mention the downright gamble on some of the cast, would Broadway's elite lineup of theatrical critics declare the show a dead ringer of a hit? Or would they sit on the fence and hedge their bets? I'm Lesley Anne Knight. You can find Just Talking Musicals on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and as a handy podcast as well. Oh yes, and as ever, we'd love it if you press subscribe. There's nothing to pay, but it means you get sent a message when we post a new episode. And coming up, don't miss the final part of our Guys and Dolls story here on Just Talking Musicals.
Just talking musicals, musicals with you.